Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back here to another installment of the one-on-one segment here on the Fantasy Flavor Podcast. My name is Dylan Thomas, and today I'm very excited to have our second guest here. Last time we had on Drew. That was awesome. I love Drew. But now we have AngeloFF or Brandon here with us today. How you doing?
Good, man. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, thank you for taking time out of your day, 2 hours of traffic to come on here, the dedication to help me out, record some good content. So I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely.
2 hours of traffic. Oh man, I can't stand 15 minutes of traffic. You
No,
know,
yeah, that's
you're
what
a
you get
trooper.
living in. Yeah, when you live in Chicago, man, that's unfortunately what you run into all the time.
Oh yeah, yeah. Boston traffic's no joke either. But I can't imagine the Chicago traffic. So
Yeah.
we're gonna just talk a little bit about here first. I kind of just want to know a little bit more about you. So
Cool.
I've heard you write for Dynasty Nerds, and Dynasty Nerds is one of the greatest, in my opinion, kind of the Dynasty communities out
Right.
there. It's just awesome. Can you talk a little bit about that experience writing?
Yeah, I mean it's been great so far. I mean, they welcomed me on about a month ago. I've actually only had this Twitter account for I think a little under 6 weeks. So they reached out to me about a month ago, and I've been happy to write with them and provide some content for them. They've been really welcoming, and I actually used to listen to them all the time before I even got my Twitter account. So it was kind of cool having them bring me into the fold there. But they're really great people, very knowledgeable and passionate about fantasy football and the sport of football. So it's been a cool experience so far, and I'm looking forward to producing more content for them.
That's awesome. Do you have any articles currently written? Like, what's your latest feature if you have any?
Yeah, I did my Y Dave Montgomery. I did my Y segment on Twitter of a lot of rookie running back. So I published my Y Dave Montgomery about a few weeks ago. Um, I add a little more to it, so it'll be a little more in depth on the Dynasty Nerd site. So the next one's gonna be Y Devin Singletary, and I'm kind of gonna probably go through the Y series and break that down and a little more in depth as it is on Twitter because there's only so much you could do in the characteristics you get. So, but yeah, so I'll be doing that, and then after that, I think I'm gonna probably do a movement based series and go from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I wanted to make sure to check out that Y series on his Twitter page. His Twitter is, I believe, at Angelo_fantasy.
Yeah, that's
And I'm
correct.
going to link that article he's talking about down below. I'm going to find it. I'm going to dig it up on the internet. Shouldn't be too hard. So you can go ahead and check that out. Um, so yeah, he's a big Bears fan, a big David Montgomery fan. I'm sure once Montgomery went to the Bears, it only kind of amplified your type of love there for Montgomery, kind of like it did for N'Keal Harry, who was my pre-draft 101. Montgomery, I don't know, was he your pre-draft 101, or does the Bears landing spot kind of help out with that?
It was really interesting because like pre-draft, I had Montgomery as my number one running back, um, and I had two ideal landing spots for him. One was Tampa, and the other was Chicago. Just because of the simple fact, I think Arians and Nagy both use a back's three down skill set very well. Like Kareem Hunt, David Johnson esque. They like backs who can block and catch passes and run well between the tackles and do a lot of different things and do them fairly well. So I thought those two situations were pretty similar to me in terms of wanting him there. Um, but I was obviously, I mean, I'm a Bears fan, so I was extremely happy. I love David Montgomery as a player, so I was extremely happy to have him as a Chicago Bear. So that was a fun night for me. I remember I was watching on the couch with my wife, and I just I just like stood up and started clapping, and she was like, why are you clapping?" And because I knew when the Bears traded up that they're going to get a back, and I knew that they were probably targeting Montgomery because they brought in, I think it was God like some like 16 running backs in that draft for visits, and Montgomery was not one of them. And they did the same thing 2 years ago with Mitch Trubisky. They didn't bring him on a visit. He was one of the only ones they didn't bring on. And so I'm like, okay, something might be up here because I think the closest comparison to a running back that Nagy's had is Kareem Hunt, and with Dave Montgomery, there's some distinct similarities, and and type of play, style of play. the way they are as movers, and also the type of competition they faced in college. So I was like, there might be some similarities. And then when I saw them, when they said the Chicago Bears are trading up, I got to the edge of my seat, thinking it was Montgomery. But yeah, I'm extremely happy that he's a Chicago Bear, and I'm excited to watch him in his tenure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like for me, right, David Montgomery, I liked him. I don't remember if he was my 3 or my 2. I had Jacobs as my 1 just because I thought he was really going to go there to the Raiders or maybe another team in the first round. So I thought he had that draft capital.
Sure.
But I like Montgomery coming out. I was pretty high on Montgomery. So that's awesome. My only concern with a guy like Montgomery is Nagy seemed to want to kind of feature Howard, and it kind of failed, especially in a pass catching role. So kind of like my thing here is now Tariq Cohen's broken out. Like that was before Tariq Cohen really, kind of shined there for the Bears. So how is that work going to be balanced? Because if it's kind of like a Jordan Howard-esque role, that's great. That has a lot of value. But it's not truly that upside that maybe some fantasy owners would want in their one-on-one, whether that's a Harry, a Jacobs, or a Sanders. So what are your kind of thoughts on that as a Bears fan who knows a lot more than me about the Bears? Can I kind of talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's great you brought that up. I mean, for me, I love Tariq Cohen. I think he's fantastic in the role that Nagy had him in last year. And I think what Nagy's going to do this year is they're going to probably run a lot more two-back sets. I think that him and Montgomery are going to be on the field at the same time. It was funny because Nagy kind of tried Jordan Howard in that Kareem Hunt role where you're on the field for 3 downs, you're catching passes, you're pass blocking. And did it for about 3 games. I think it was 2 or 3 games, and he averaged like 23 touches per game during that span. Granted, small sample size, but after that, Howard's usage obviously changed dramatically, and Tariq Cohen had a big uptick in snaps and targets. So I think it'll be more of a balance. Um, I mean, I don't know the exact because they have Mike Davis there, who's also a very capable back, but I don't think the Bears would have traded up and with the little capital they had in this year's draft to take Montgomery if they didn't think they were going to use him and use him pretty early and often. But I do think that obviously you're not going to get a guy who's going to touch the ball 20, 25 times a game. But I do think him eclipsing the 215, 250 even touch mark is very feasible. I think he's more than above adequate in the passing game. So I think he has passing down upside. It really is all going to depend on game script too. The Bears defense is so dominant, and they're only getting better. That I think that in close games, obviously they're going to probably keep Montgomery on the field, and we're going to see the Bears in a lot of close games this year. So I think Montgomery's going to get a ton of snaps. I think Cohen's going to be moved around a lot more than he was last year. I think we're going to see him out wide in the slot. I think we're going to see him all over the field. So I think that'll be really interesting as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if we also see Montgomery in the Wildcat as well, with Cohen in the backfield too. We saw Montgomery line up there at Iowa State a lot near the goal line. So I think that'll be an interesting place they could use him in as well. So I think there'll be a good balance. I think it's a fantasy viable offense for both backs, and I think both backs could end up being top 25 running backs in 2019.
Yeah, I definitely think that's interesting. And kind of before you're talking a little bit about, and I just realized how mad I am that like Tampa Bay, Kansas City, I was looking at the 2019 draft class. A little bit of a tangent here, sorry, but they're like really good landing spots, right? And they got like kind of Jack Italy, right? Like, I mean, Darwin Thompson may be the most alluring name there. So I think it's just 2019 was underdelivered because the talent wasn't the best compared to other classes, but man, were there some good landing spots. Right. So that was a little underwhelming. Chicago was one of those good landing spots. Obviously, maybe not as appealing as some other ones, like maybe Kansas City, obviously, because there's like maybe just beat out Damian Williams, true 3-down workhorse. That Cohen's always going to be there. I heard they're trying to extend Cohen too. So overall, what did you think about this draft class then? Was it disappointing? Did it actually exceed your expectations? You had low expectations again, maybe? What are your thoughts about that?
That's a good question. Honestly, they kind of landed right where I thought. Do I think fit like raw surface level talent? Obviously, 2019 isn't going to surpass 2020, But I think we're going to see kind of an oversaturation of running backs in the 2020 class. There's so many good names coming out, even projecting in that 5 to 8 to 10 back range, where we're going to have guys like Eno Benjamin. We're going to have really good guys, Brian Robinson Jr., like guys who aren't really considered as upper echelon names right now, who would be the RB1 to RB3 in this class. So it's interesting to me, but I think we kind of take for granted the nuances of and the I guess the unique abilities the players in this class represent. The two that I think are the most unique in terms of what they do are Darrell Henderson and David Montgomery, just because their skill sets are very different than everybody in the class. I think David Montgomery is the best 3-down back in this class, and I think he's the most complete running back in this class as well. And I think he's the best mover. He understands coverages. He understands zones and defenses. He understands holes, when to hit them, um, how to how to essentially use his versatility to his advantage. And I think that's a big thing in this era of NFL, where we're looking at guys getting in space a ton more. But I think with Henderson too, he's probably the best big play back that I've seen come out in a while. He's the best accelerator that I've seen since Chris Johnson. And I think that he's in a unique situation with the not St. Louis anymore, Los Angeles Rams, to really break out of to the fantasy scene here pretty shortly if we see Gurley missing any time. So I think it's just really different. I think there's unique talents in this class. I think like guys like Miles Sanders are a year or two away from being pretty darn good, and guys like Josh Jacobs are, I'm kind of scratching my head at that because I don't know what he's going to be, So it's I guess it's a less clear class than we're going to see from next year and probably the year after.
It's kind of hard for me, and I kind of want to talk about 2020 here for a second. Sounds like you're a little familiar with it. Just overall 2019, I kind of agree. I owned a lot of 2019 picks, and kind of, the whole consensus was kind of, trade back, grab those 2020 picks, or just trade back at all. Like screw this class, just trade back. You know what I mean? Like, it's so deep, there's no top talent. But honestly, when the draft was done, I'm like, there's the 3 running backs, the Keel Harry. Then the rest of it's like a landmine. Like, I don't know who's gonna hit. Maybe you like a Paris Campbell, maybe you like a DK Metcalf, but those kind of guys were in their own tier almost. So overall, for me, that was kind of my philosophy with the draft. I'm like, if you have one of those picks, just keep them until it's draft day and see what the heck you can get. But 2020 for me, kind of consensus. Almost seems like, hey, grab all the 2020 first you can. They're only going to be more expensive from here on out. Do you kind of advise to do that strategy? Do you kind of say, well, let's pause the brakes here? It's a whole year away. If we look back at the 2019 draft class last year, some of the names for the 101, I think it was like Bryce Love, you had Rodney Anderson. And those guys, now you're not even really drafting them until the 3rd, 4th round in your rookie draft. So a lot can change. Right. So what do you think? Is this draft class really that worth it?
Oh, man, I think you hit the nail on the head. I was actually one of those guys last year. I have a big Devy keeper league that's probably my most prominent league that I'm in. But I took Bryce Love. I love Bryce Love. But it's one of those things where it's really hard to gauge depending on your roster construction. I was pretty deep at running back, so I'm like, all right, I want to take Love and put him on next year's roster and see what he does. But now it's like, am I even gonna roster him? Am I gonna keep him? So it's like, same thing could happen next year. We don't know. So the 2020 class is probably gonna look very different than it is now. So I don't know if I would advise against hoarding some 2020 picks, but I would test the waters and see. But it also depends on how those picks are going to be. So, if you're going to be getting 101 or 102 next year, and you're kind of guaranteed to get a Jerry Jeudy or a Swift, great. So after that, there's still some great players, obviously. Etienne, there's Taylor, there's Dobbins, and there's a ton of other guys who are right up there to battle for the top 5 backs in next year's class. But we just don't know right now. It's very uncertain. So I always like to err on the side of certainty. So I won't be trading for 2020 picks if I can help it. And it also depends on your roster construction. So if you're pretty comfortable with where you are right now with your roster, and don't have any gaping holes, and next year you think you're gonna be fine, then I would maybe consider trading away some of those 2021st, to get a good guy. Some people were like, yeah, I traded away Julio Jones and received I got 2021st. So it's like, wait, what? So you can get like I received Julio Jones and traded away 2021st, and it's interesting to me because there's so many players now, like upper echelon type players in fantasy football that are getting traded away who are on the older side, like AB, Julio, um, some of those guys, and it's like we have no idea what guys like Jerry Judy, DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne are going to be. We don't even know if they're going to come out next year. Like, what if they get injured? That's a possibility. So it's tough. I mean, you're kind of trading away. You're trading for a giant question mark. So it's always a situation where if you like to gamble a little bit and you really think you can hit on some of those guys and you evaluate them pretty thoroughly and you're excited about their potential, then by all means go for it. But I think there are definitely some options out there that you can trade away those 2020 picks and get some really good players in return.
Yeah, I kind of have a couple comments, questions, stuff since we're on 2020. I didn't know if you knew much about 2020. I'm glad you do because I feel like everyone's like invest in the 2020 class, invest in the 2020 class.
Sure.
Like a lot of people are just throwing and buying those picks, like myself, because I'm dumb. I have 5 2020
Okay.
first next year in like one of my favorite leagues, and it's
Love
a complete rebuild. The roster is pretty good. I'm pretty sure I have the guaranteed 101. I feel pretty confident about getting the 102. And I feel like all the picks, like I don't feel like any of the teams that the picks I have, including my own, can really like win it next year. So I feel good about that. So you kind of saying don't invest, maybe try to look to sell. I should reevaluate that. The second thing
Yeah.
you kind of talked about, and then I have a third thing. I have a lot of things, if you can't
I
tell.
like it. No worries. That's why I'm here.
A lot of things here, but I was recently offered, and I wonder if he's going to be listening. He's going to be a little heated. So this guy, his team's kind of a mess. It's not the greatest. I mean, it could maybe make the playoffs, like best case scenario. I don't think it's winning it though. He offered me Derrick Henry and Cortland Sutton, all for his 120 first and my Arcega Whiteside, I believe. And it was hard for me, but I declined it. And I kind of talked to some people. Some people thought, "Wow, that's like such a steal. Grab that," And other people were kind of like, "Well, it's kind of fair." I get why you said no. Like for me, it was just like I didn't get that true stud, and I think that pick could legitimately be 103. And like I said, I have almost half the first round picks, in that kind of class, so I can kind of just control what the heck happens in that draft. So I'm like, for me, I'm gonna get leverage. So with these kind of picks and such, well, one, what do you think about that trade-off, right? Am I dumb? You can say I'm dumb. It's okay.
No,
And the
I mean,
second thing is, do you recommend like selling them now or selling them later? Or does that kind of depend on the value you're getting?
the picks or the players?
Selling the picks for probably a player in that
Okay.
case.
I'm not a big Derrick Henry fan actually at all. I mean, if you're playing PPR, he offers you little to no passing game upside. So you're basically just hoping he scores a touchdown each week. So if for him to hit value, he has to score about anywhere from 12 to 16 touchdowns. You know what I mean? So for me, it's tough to move on that if I'm the Derrick Henry. If I'm trying to I get it because I think that picks me better than Derrick Henry. I mean, I just don't think he's that great. He's good, but he's not enticing. So I like Sutton more than Henry. I think Sutton's going to be a stud. I loved him coming out. He was my wide receiver 1 last year. And I think he's in a great situation in Denver. Well, I shouldn't say great situation. He's in a better situation than he was at this time last year. Um, but in terms of me advising for the 2020 picks, I think, in all honesty, now is the time. If you're gonna sell them, try to sell them. Because what's gonna end up happening is a couple of these guys are bound to get hurt, or things are gonna happen. The first quarter of the season doesn't go their way, and the price is gonna kind of ebb and flow. And right now, the price is really high for those type of players. That are projected to come out. So I would test the waters and see what you can get for sure, because you might be able to get a pretty decent haul for some of those 2020 picks.
Yeah, kind of my final question here, because
Sure.
I want to talk more about 2019, is the question was asked to me, and I figured you know more about this draft class than I do. You're a big film guy, and that's awesome. I'm not much of a film guy. We'll get into that too, so stay tuned for that. But with this 2020 class, I assume your one-on-one's David Montgomery. So how many players would you have in front David Montgomery right now? If for your 101, is it like nobody? Is it David Montgomery? Then all those guys, like if they were in like this draft class, let's say, and they kind of
Oof.
produced the same way they did, like what players would you have? Would you have Judy? How many players? Because when I was asked, I had like 5, 6, almost 7 names. I'm like,
Sure.
I'd probably take him over N'Keal Harry, which is my 101. So what are your
Sure.
thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, I had David Montgomery as my number one running back. My 101 was actually AJ Brown, in all honesty. I loved AJ Brown coming out, but his situation with the Titans is obviously less than ideal. Um, but I mean, I would take. Here's the thing is like, in looking at service level talent, like Dave Montgomery isn't super enticing there. You have to kind of look at more the nuances of football and see what he really does exceptionally well. But Swift, in terms of running backs, I would take Swift, Etienne, and that's probably it, honestly. Like people are gonna say, wait, no Jonathan Taylor, no, Benjamin. Um, but I, I'm not as sold on those guys as complete players in the NFL that I am as David Montgomery and what his role is now. And that's the thing that's tough is we're kind of looking at what their role is going to be and projecting that, but we don't know what their landing spot is, right? So, like, we know David Montgomery landed with the Chicago Bears, and we know XYZ about that landing spot. We don't know where Swift's going to go, where Judy's going to go. We don't know where Benjamin's going to go. We don't know where Etienne's going to go. So, it's tough to gauge, but like in terms of pure talent and me liking the players, I love Etienne, love Taylor. Those are two backs I'm taking over Montgomery for sure because I think they have the it factor. I think their level of perceptual cognitive skill is really high, and they're fantastic movers. They're great receivers out of the backfield. I know Etienne hasn't really had that much exposure as a receiver in college, but his movement profile kind of shouts to me that he's going to be a great receiving option um, in the NFL. But I think those two guys for sure. Everybody else, I'm not. I like them. I think they're going to be great. I think they have first round, rookie draft capital next year. But I'm not as sold on them as I was and am on David Montgomery and where he's at in terms of his landing spot.
Yeah, 100%. And I have a question here, and this kind of ties in more to
Sure.
it's obvious you're a film guy, right? You're not the biggest numbers guy, which isn't a problem because it's kind of film versus numbers, right? So I have a two-part question here for you, and I kind of want you to go into detail here. You can take your time, 5, 10 minutes. Like I don't care how
Okay.
long you talk here because I really want a good answer.
Sounds good.
Kind of talk about why you prefer, if I'm correct here, correct me if I'm wrong, film versus stats. Why do you prefer film there? And something I want to clarify for myself and the viewers. What are the nuances? What are these nuances you're talking about, like on film or statistically or whatever these nuances are? How would I indicate these nuances? Kind of break down, what you think nuances, stuff like that, and kind of break down
Sure.
the film versus stats for you, if you don't mind here.
No problem. For me, it's not so much film versus stats because I can look at and watch a football game and not really learn anything from it, right? I'm just watching it. Um, and for me, it's more of a marriage of the two. How can I marry the two and build my evaluation upon it? So for me, watching film isn't really watching film. So obviously, like we've talked a little bit about my background and my career, and I work in human performance and biomechanics. So I spend a lot of time slowing down film and dissecting movement qualities of athletes. So for me, that's my day to day. And so when I watch film essentially and look at and evaluate players, football players, I do the same thing. So it's kind of a marriage of the two. Do I look at stats? Absolutely. Do I look at yards per carry? Absolutely. But I don't basically pin my evaluation on those statistics. I will always look at my evaluation as them as a mover first and foremost, because that's the most important thing for them as an NFL athlete, is how well they move, how well they perceive, how well they react. Those are important attributes of an NFL player, not just running backs, but every single position besides kicker, punter. But I mean, for me, I look at a lot of things that, obviously we've seen on Twitter, my evaluations of like David Montgomery, and perceptual cognitive skill is the number one indicator for success for an NFL player. So what that means is, how does a player perceive the defender? Obviously, the defender is a 220, 200 to 260 pound human being for the linebacker, and they're sprinting at him anywhere from 15 to 20 miles an hour. How do I, in that moment, perceive what they're going to be doing, anticipate that, make a decision that helps my team win the game? And that's the objective, right? So it's me as a mover versus them. How can I deceive? How can I avoid? And how can I collide with versatility to meet my objective? And that's what really we're talking about here is, we look at, okay, agility. Well, agility is not agility. That's a buzzword. I don't like buzzwords. Agility is contact avoidance. We're trying to avoid contact in the most efficient way we possibly can to obtain the most, I guess, the best outcome. So that's what we're really looking at. We're looking at players, movers, and you ask the question, how can I, watch film and, get more? You have to start to break things down and kind of slow it down. Like looking at things at full speed, you can say, okay, he's fast, he's quick, he did a spin move, he jumped over a guy. All right, we can see all that, right? But for me, what I'm looking at is, what is David Montgomery thinking on X run? What is Miles Sanders thinking? Well, the defensive back is 2 yards away from him, and I have to decide, whether pick the whole defensive back, pick the whole linebacker. How do I get around both those at once? How do I obtain the best outcome of the situation? And that's really what we're trying to do. So for me, in my evaluation process, I'm always trying to put myself in the athlete's shoes. What are they experiencing at that current point in time? And that's very situational. We see a lot of times running backs who get stuffed in a hole. Okay, sometimes that stuff's unavoidable. Obviously the blocking breaks down, what have you. But we can also see them in the open field as movers. How do they deceive the moving chess piece that is the defender coming at them? Because the defender has a brain. So it's you versus me. We're both thinking, feeling human beings. But how do I avoid you or collide into you and still have the most efficient outcome? And that's what it really is about. So for me, like the biggest things are, if we're looking at just traits, and I'm gonna probably do a Twitter breakdown, a thread covering some of these, because I think this is important for the fantasy community to kind of start to understand is, what are we looking at here? We're looking at speed, burst, all these agility, power, all these buzzwords that don't mean anything. Throw those out the window, okay? Those don't mean a thing because they don't exist. What exists is a player's level of perceptual cognitive skill, a player's, I guess, movement intellect, their ability to avoid contact, their ability to be versatile when they collide, their ability to accelerate functionally, their ability to hold top end speed, their ability to get to a maximum top end speed. Those are qualities that we need to understand further to actually be able to watch film, break it down, and kind of understand. I'm a big what and why guy. And what I mean by that is, I have to know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And when I watch a player, I want to know what they're doing and why they're doing it as best I possibly can, so I can put my evaluation and hang it on something. I don't want to say, well, this guy averaged 4.6 yards a carry. This means X, Y, Z in terms of his projection for the 2019 season. That stuff is well and good and fantastic, right? But everybody else on the planet can do that. We're in the age of technology. I can go on my computer and if in 30 minutes come up with an intricate breakdown on Marlon Mack and what he does well and doesn't do well based on the statistical analysis of the last decade, right? Anyone can do that if they have the time and the energy. They want to put forth the effort to do so. But what gets people, I think, what can get people in this community ahead of the game is looking at the game from a different lens, from more biomechanist perspective, as you will. So, like in my, I guess in my perspective, I'm looking at the NFL athlete as a mover, and in a specific environment where there's uncontrollable factors, and they're in different situations on a down to down basis, and they have to make different decisions on a down to down basis. So, for me, I guess I'm kind of rambling on a tangent, but to wrap up, for me, it's important to understand what the athlete is trying to achieve and why they're trying to achieve it. It is fantastic to watch athletes run the open field, right? We can get a very good indication of how big and how fast someone is by just looking at them, right? We all watch football. We all watch the sport. We all love and enjoy the sport and are passionate about it, right? So, guys like Leonard Fournette, we see Leonard Fournette and are enamored with the physical talent. 6 feet, 230, runs like a deer. But he does a lot of things very poorly. But we don't look at that because we love the physical traits, the service level talent. Same with guys like Miles Sanders, right? They have all this service level talent, but once we break them down and begin to see them in a more intricate lens, we see the things they do poorly as movers that will inhibit their success at the next level. And that's kind of the way that I like to view movement, my career as well, and fantasy football. I like to kind of marry those all in and then use statistical analysis kind of in the background. I still use it. I still use yards per carry. I still use, I'll still look up efficiency metrics, things like that. But I'll never hang my hat on that. I'll always look at an athlete as a mover, um, and then look at the statistics and see if they line up, where they went wrong, and kind of see what their trajectory is as an NFL athlete in the future.
Yeah, I think that's such a great analysis there. And one thing I want to say before I have my next question here is he talked about making the Twitter thread about how to kind of analyze film and what you should actually be looking for film. So I just want to make sure you guys right now, the audience, keep in mind he's 6 weeks fresh. He's one of the hottest right now on Twitter, growing here. So follow him at Angelo_fantasy. I got that right?
Yeah, Angelo_fantasy.
Angelo_fantasy. I know I'm going to retweet the heck out of that. I'll smash that retweet button just in case you weren't following him for some reason. But he's got like way more followers than I do, so you should be following him. If you're not following him, why are you following me? So, my next question here is: it seems like a couple of your buzzwords, right, are mover and nuances. So when you're talking about mover, I just want to clarify this because I don't look at football film. I really want to get into it. It's just realistically, I haven't gotten into it yet. So when you talk about mover, you can kind of use kind of those. You move away from those buzzwords. Let's phrase it like this. So you don't kind of look at agility. You kind of don't look at, kind of speed or burst or stuff like that. You kind of want to look at the intellect of a player, kind of their game knowledge of the player. And you kind of talked about that being stuff like reading blocks, for example. I actually didn't mention that. But what you did talk about was kind of how they try to avoid contact, how they take contact, stuff like that.
Sure.
So when you're talking about film, are you talking about more, and specifically the mover? I want to know more about what you mean as, when you talk about a player as a mover. Like, what do you mean exactly by that? And how does that tie into the nuances?
Sure. I mean, by mover, I like to kind of look at it in terms of, all right, if I'm getting from point A to point B, what's the most efficient path for that player? What do I perceive the most efficient path for that player to be? And for me, I like to look at what their big toe is doing mechanically what their hips are doing. Um, are they kind of showing their cards? I like to say is it is someone predetermining their destination, if that makes sense. So like as a mover, I think David Montgomery is unbelievably nuanced because he uses deception as his primary quality. He's not fast. He doesn't have a high level of functional acceleration either, but he is so deceptive in how he moves in space. And that's the most interesting part is everybody's very different as a mover. Some people are very rigid. Some people don't have a lot of um, functionality functionality in the lateral plane like Daryl Henderson. He doesn't. He's not very functional laterally. He's very good horizontally. Extremely good accelerator, highest level of functional acceleration in this class, and he has a very high rate of play speed. But go back to your question. If I'm looking at an athlete as a mover, I'm trying to put myself in their shoes and how they make decisions on a down-to-down basis. You can kind of it's very unquantifiable, so you can't really put a metric on it. You can't put a number on it, right?
Yeah.
But you can start to see if an athlete's going, if Marlon Mack's going through this hole and he's just sprinting through their daylight. Okay, that's great. Was that his only option? What's his option here? If you see a running back get stuffed in the backfield, make a spin move, cut back left, and go against the grain and gain 35 yards, how did he arrive at that outcome? And that's constantly what I'm thinking about is my brain's whirring and whirring and whirring. It's like, hey, how did he arrive at X outcome? And that's really what football is how are we arriving at each outcome on a down-to-down basis? And that's literally what it is we get 2 yards, 3 yards. How do we get that 2, 3 yards, right? Like if Alvin Kamara runs an option route, a 6-yard option route, how do he choose to go right instead of break left across the middle? That's what we're looking at here is more of the cognitive skill level of the player and how they are thinking and perceiving things when they have the ball in their hands, when they don't have the ball in their hands, and when they're in space as a mover.
That's awesome. And as you were talking here, I'm sorry. There's a little bit of background noise currently while you were talking. I believe it picked up, so I'm sorry about that. But
No worries, no worries.
you know, for me, I just think it's awesome. I actually mouthed while you're talking. Like, wow, this is like fascinating because I don't know anything about this. This is like I show up to a different country and I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. So I think I like the way you look at things because you look at it from an intellectual way. Because I feel like intellectuality kind of translates. Is that even a word? Whatever, man. It kind of translates sort of to kind of like how smart a player is because you look at a team like the Patriots, right? Super smart team, and that's why they're successful, and that's why they have so many fantasy relevant kind of players because they pride themselves on kind of intelligence and kind of the little things in football can really go a long way, especially when you're comparing people. Like, for example, let's just take these top 3 kind of rookie running backs that we're currently talking about. Your Josh Jacobs, your Miles Sanders, your David Montgomery, and they're all so close. You look at rankings, and all of them are like flip-flop, left, right, whatever. Like, they're all like mismatched depending on when you go from ranking to ranking to ranking. So, with that being said, these nuances, in my opinion, really help you differentiate. Like, you talked about breaking Miles Sanders down and how he has a lot of red flags. You talked a little bit about, and we're going to get into this, so stay tuned, Josh Jacobs and maybe why you were so high on him. And then you talked about David Montgomery and why you were slamming the gas on that hype train. So I think that's just really interesting. And I've been higher on the David Montgomery too. So I like how you've done that because it helps you kind of say, okay, here's player 1, here's player 2, here's player 3. And I could kind of rank them a little bit according to kind of that these little nuances they have, how they move as a mover, even just away from the running back position. So I think that's film is really hard. And it's hard because it's subjective. But I like how you try to look at it as not saying, okay, this guy has fast agility, fast burst, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, numbers can tell us that. Granted, the guy can look faster or slower in film, but numbers can tell us that. So I just think that's fascinating. So I kind of want to look, and I want you to kind of hold yourself accountable here, just because I'm kind of curious. What's one player that maybe the community was lower on, but you were higher on, because of these nuances of the mover, or just, for any case, really, it doesn't really matter. Not necessarily about that. Um, what was one player, the community was lower on, but you were higher on, and you were right? And do you have an example of vice versa? So you were higher on them, and you were like, hype train, slamming down the gas, and then it turns out the community was more right, or you were just flat out wrong about the player. Do you have like two examples, one of each, about something like that?
Yeah, in the current draft class or previous? Which ones?
Probably previous, so we can know if you're,
Okay.
if you were right or you were wrong, at least up to this
Sure.
current date.
Oh God. Oh, I'll start with my biggest fail, and I think I posted it somewhere a couple days ago. But man, was I high on Bo Scarborough. Oh God, that blew up. But that really wasn't like I wasn't really looking at him as a mover. I just love his size and speed, man. Like Leonard Fournette, like dude lights it up because he's 6'2", whatever, and 235 pounds and runs like a deer, right? So we love that. We love that. That's flashy, man. That's style. But he's terrible. He's not a football player. He's terrible. He's on a practice squad. So that was my worst one. I think there's two calls that I made. I think were I'm never gonna like pat myself on the head, but Alvin Kamara was probably my most, I'd say, prolific. Um, I had him as the RB1 in that class 2 years ago with Christian McCaffrey, um, Kareem Hunt. But I thought he was just the moment I watched him, I'm like, this kid is unique, special. And Alvin Kamara is a generational talent as a football player. Generational. There. I don't think there's a better mover, a pure mover at the running back position than Alvin Kamara. He is far and away the best mover at the position. I think Saquon Barkley's up there too. I think it's 1 and 2 for those two guys. But that was my biggest one. I just loved him. I still do. I think he's fantastic. He's a generational, transcendent talent. And then let's see if I can find another one that I really, really missed on. For some reason, I was really high on Max Williams. You know the form, yeah.
Oh, the tight end?
Yeah,
right, for the Ravens or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know why I was really high on Max Williams. I love his catch radius. I thought he played pretty fast. I mean, I thought he did a lot of things well, but it didn't really work out. But I feel like as I've grown in my career, I've gotten better at evaluating prospects. I'm doing it every day with athletes, right? So I've been getting better at noticing the nuances, and the more I've grown in that capacity, I've grown in the fantasy football realm as well. Like I've just kind of started to understand things and I guess develop my my coach's eye, if that's a good word for it. But I don't really like hits and misses are fun. But definitely those are probably the three that I remember most prevalently. I was really high in Philip Lindsay, but he's a he's a Pro Bowl running back, right? So he was pretty good. But at his size, it's tough. It's tough to be elite, but he's an elite mover, so it makes it easier. But yeah, those are probably my three biggest calls. Two terrible ones. And then Alvin Kamara.
Oh yeah, man, those were awful. Oh my god, those were terrible. Oh my god, who would ever listen to you? Me? Just kidding. No, I'm giving you a little bit of shit. But
I love it.
I want to take a moment here to remind everybody who's listening on YouTube that we're now on iTunes. We're now on Apple Podcasts. I literally just got the notification mid-podcast. I'm super excited here. And one of my fellow podcasters actually had a question for you, just quickly here. I don't want to take up too much of your time. And
no worries.
We had about a 2-hour argument today about Kenyon Drake. My guy really, 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 really likes Kenyon Drake so much. we did a mock draft episode recently that was released probably 2 days ago now, and it was a redraft league. It was David Montgomery and Kenyon Drake on the clock, and I'm like, I'm going Montgomery here, and he's like, Kenyon Drake. What are your thoughts on Kenyon Drake quickly here? Just kind of curious about your thoughts.
I love Kenyon Drake. I think he has RB1 potential. I think he's been.
Come on, dude.
I think, like, looking at it from a movement perspective, he's probably in that upper echelon of movers at the running back position. He's gifted, gifted spatial awareness. He's really gifted in space. Like as a like at deceiving defenders, he's a gifted running back. He hasn't got the opportunity yet. I think it was like last year receiving over 10 or more touches. He averaged like 16 PPR points a game with 5 targets. Didn't happen much because obviously Gore was there too, but Gore leaves like 11 touches per game, right? And Flores and O'Shea are both from the Belichick coaching tree, right? So we look at what the New England offense did last year in 2018, and they targeted backs 172 times. A lot. It's a lot of targets. So we're looking at a guy with anywhere from 65 to 80 target upside. It's a lot of targets for running back position. And he projects to be receiving anywhere from 14 to 20 touches a game. And he's in an offense that's going to be playing behind a lot, right? The Miami defense isn't very good. They'll probably be bottom 5, bottom 4 in the NFL next year or this coming season. So I'm buying Kenyon Drake wherever I can. I just think this is the perfect storm for him. And I think this is his coming out party. And there's been Kenyon Drake truthers who have been kind of hanging out by a thread there. But I think Adam Gase vastly underutilized him. And he is he's a unique NFL running back. And I think he's a true 3-down threat. Do I like him more than Montgomery? Ugh, I don't know. I might be the biased Bears fan, but even then, I think Kenyon Drake has a better 2019 than David Montgomery does. I do think so. He's not in a better situation team wise, but I think Kenyon Drake's gonna have those giant boom weeks because he's gonna be playing from behind a ton, and he might have games where he gets 7-8 receptions, right? So that's what we're kind of banking on when we look at Kenyon Drake. I think he's been phenomenally efficient. I think he's averaged over 5 yards per carry, for his career so far in limited time. If he puts up over 1,200 yards rushing and over 1,500 total yards, my shock no. But I think that's the caliber of player he is. Being in a contract year, I think he gets the opportunity to do that. Because I think the Dolphins are going to want to see what they have for their future. If they're going to want to spend some draft capital next year, on a second, third round running back, because the class is pretty deep next year, or they want to re-sign Drake and play the hand of fate in that regard. So, but yeah, I love Kenyon Drake this year. I think he's phenomenal. He's a great NFL athlete who I think will do quite well in that Flores and O'Shea offense.
Man, I just took an L there because, man, one of my fellow, podcasters here, Trenton, was here. He'd be like, "Told you so," Angelo, Brandon, my guy here agrees with me. But I don't know. To only counterpoint your point, right? 14 to 20 touches, right? Probably going to be a bottom 5 offense in the league. I don't really got much talent there. None of it's really proven. I mean, the line, probably one of the weaker lines in the league. Receiving core, kind of kind of crapshoot there. Excuse me. Drake, really, I mean, I think he's had 7 seasons, including college and the NFL. He's never been really like a workhorse. So my problem with Kenyon Drake is we're projecting him to be something he's not. Kenyon Drake's always going to be Kenyon Drake. And I thought Montgomery could legitimately be a top 10 running back.
Oh, I agree.
Depending on how Tariq Cohen was used. And for me, I just don't see the upside with Drake because he's on a bad offense. And I've chased these backs before that were kind of in these bad offenses or behind these bad lines. An example would be Eddie Lacy, actually. I was pretty high in Eddie Lacy a couple years ago. It was kind of, honestly, probably a better Seattle offense there. But, it's kind of like the same thing. It was kind of like that mid-5th, 6th round running back. And Eddie Lacy, complete opposite, could be a workhorse if he laid off a couple cheeseburgers, in China food, as he says. But overall, that's just kind of my view on Drake. I do like Drake. I think he's gonna be super inconsistent. I don't know. I just like David Montgomery, but I kind of want to move on here.
Sure, no worries. Sounds good.
And you were talking about your buy sell series. I think you referenced it before. If not, he has a buy sell series, which is great. I've referenced it before myself on this podcast, so you should be familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it, what the heck are you doing? But I kind of wanted to. We talked about Marlon Mack and we talked about Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson, you're going out and buying him. Marlon Mack, you're saying, I like some other guys. I'm going to go ahead and sell him. So tell me, why are you buying Robbie Anderson and why are you selling Marlon Mack?
Oof, that's a good one. We'll start with Marlon Mack. The biggest reason I'm selling Marlon Mack is because of the inefficiency that he's had throughout his career and the injury history. I'm really concerned about his concussions. That's first and foremost. I think that is the biggest predictor of soft tissue injury and NFL athletes and athletes in general. I think science shows you're more than twice as likely to receive a soft tissue injury in the next 365 days if you have a concussion. He's had 2 concussions in a span of 2 years, and in each one of those years, he's had 2 grade 2 hamstring tears, and he has a torn labrum. So we're talking about, outside of the concussions, 3 very significant injuries that he's missed time with. And I think that's because of experiencing repeated brain trauma to a point where he has concussion. But besides that, I think he's just been really meh as a running back. He's been really inefficient. The thing is here, he's attached to a phenomenal offense. So he might have weeks where he scores 3 touchdowns. But that's what you're going to have to bank on, right? I mean, I think he's only had 1 game over 3 receptions in his career, none in 2018. When they were both active at the same time, I think Hines out-targeted Mack 47-26, and during the last 5 games of the regular season, Hines out-targeted Mack 30-9. So we're looking at minuscule passing game upside. In addition to 65% of his regular season games, he's been held under 35 rushing yards. Yes, the Colts offense is very good. Yes, they will score a lot of points. But no, when you're asking me if I'm going to buy Marlon Mack. He's just too inefficient. He's going to be too inconsistent from week to week. Because if he doesn't score a touchdown, what are you going to get out of him? So that's a tough thing for me is saying this guy has X ceiling. I see the ceiling. I see he's attached to a phenomenal offense, top 3 offense in the league this year, I think. But I just really don't see the floor that I like to see in my RB1, RB2s. Moving on to Robbie Anderson, I honestly just think that he's Sam Darnold's favorite target. And I'm enamored more so by the red zone consistency that he's kind of seen the last 5 games of last year. He doubled the next closest Jets receiver. I think Andre Roberts had 4 red zone targets, and Anderson had 8 in his last 5 games. That's puts him like at 1.6 per game. So if you kind of exasperate that into a 16-game season, it's like 26 red zone targets, which is kind of right in that upper echelon tier of DeAndre Hopkins, the Antonio Browns of the world. Do I think that's going to happen in 2019? No, but do I think it's out of the range of outcomes? No, I don't think it is. I think it is in the range of outcomes for 2019. But Adam Gase is his coach. That's kind of where it kind of gets fuzzy for me as him as a buy. If he's healthy, I think he's a top 14 option in 2019 with weekly wide receiver 1 upside. But you don't know what you're getting with Adam Gase. He's probably the most inconsistent head coach in terms of fantasy efficiency over the past couple of years of what we're seeing on a week-to-week basis. We just don't know. I love Sam Darnold, and I like that offense more and more. But I don't like Adam Gase. So the pieces are great, but I just don't know about Adam Gase here. But I would buy Robbie Anderson. I think he's gonna be pretty cheap right now too. But I think we saw in 2018 he only received 4 targets, like below 4 targets only once. So he has decent floor. I think that floor is gonna be solid in 2019, and you're gonna get that ceiling because he has big play potential, especially if you play in a league with bonuses. I mean, he'll be in that upper I guess upper quarter of the league in touchdowns over 40 yards. So I project him to be there. So I think that's an interesting thing for Anderson and Mack, as we talked about. But I would buy Anderson. I would sell Mack at this point.
Yeah, thank you for that. Those are two guys I was interested in. One guy, by the way, I agree with you with both of those. I don't know if I'm in love with Anderson, but a number one on that offense, and he could get replaced in 2020. 2020 is kind of be this cloud when we draft some of these more questionable guys that are coming. For redraft, I like Anderson a little bit more. Um, but for Dynasty, I don't mind buying Anderson. I like Anderson. He's good talent. Plays a little bit like that deep threat, but Gase talked about moving him around, so hopefully that helps his production. Granted,
Right.
I think in December it was pretty good once Sam Darnold really took a step. So thank you for that. And we kind of talked about your Y series before. You talked about bringing that over to Dynasty Nerds. Make sure to check out those articles. Will be down below in the description in the YouTube video. If you're on Apple Podcasts, I don't know if I can add it in the description. I'll see. I'll tweet it out too. Can you kind of break down to me your order of the 3 running backs here? You've already gone pretty in depth with David Montgomery. You've alluded to Miles Sanders. You've slightly hated on Josh Jacobs. What's your order? What's your kind of take on all of them? Kind of break those 3 down for me. What order should I take them in? What order should other take them in? Go ahead.
It's tough, man. It all really depends on your roster construction and what you're doing, I guess, to better your team in Dynasty. So what your holes are, what your weaknesses are. But if I'm gonna start up and I'm on the clock and those 3 guys are there, I'm taking Montgomery first. Second, I might take Henderson. Third, I'd take Jacobs. Fourth, I might take Miles Sanders. I like Justice Hill better than him, honestly, but those are kind of my 4-5. And then my pre-draft 4-5 as well. But I think Montgomery's the most nuanced back in the draft. I think he's the best pure running back in this draft, and I think he gets the opportunity to kind of showcase that in Chicago. Darrell Henderson, I think, is honestly in the best situation, which is kind of funny because we have guys like Sanders, who's in Philly and who might have a big 2020, and we're behind Jacobs, who has a clear cut lead role in with the Raiders there. So, but for me, I'm looking at ceiling wise, like after Montgomery, I think he'll present you a pretty nice floor week to week. Ceiling wise, Henderson's is sky high. If Gurley misses time, and there's been some writing on the wall about Todd Gurley, which is kind of coming out now, about his availability towards the end of last year and what that kind of means for him in the future and going forward. I mean, I think it was the first 11 games of last year, he never had under 19 touches ever. In the first 11 games of 2018, he never had had under 19 touches in those first 11 games. From game 11 on, he had under 19 touches 5 times. So something went wrong somewhere, right? So we're looking at this string of unfortunate events, and that string keeps getting longer. So at some point, something's going to come out about Gurley's situation, about his arthritis, about him having additional surgery, what have you, to help his future, because the Rams made a pretty sizable future investment, right? For Todd Gurley and what they believe in him to be, because I think he's one of the best players in the NFL, not even just running backs. He's one of the best players in the league. So losing him is obviously a big blow, which is why I think they traded up. They traded 2 third-round picks and up 24 spots to get Darrell Henderson. So I think Henderson might be in a situation where if he is the lead back for an extended period of time, I shouldn't even say lead backs. I think they'd split touches with him and Brown, but If he's getting the more valuable touches out of the two, you're looking at a guy who's a weekly RB1. I mean, that's the ceiling of what you're getting. You're getting a guy he could be a top 3 scorer in some weeks, mostly because the Rams score 34 points a game, and that's one thing you can't really say for the other offenses. The Bears won't do that. The Eagles, I don't think they'll do that either. The Raiders definitely not. So you're looking at more towards volume for the other backs. And Miles Sanders might have the hardest path to touches with being in front of a Pro Bowler and him being out with injury recently, and just not seeing practice time. And then if we go away from Henderson, I think Jacobs is going to see some volume there in with the Raiders. So I think Gruden has his guy now, so I think they're gonna ride him. So I think he'll see some volume in that offense. Sanders, it's tough because I think if Sanders cleans some things up, he's a perennial Pro Bowler. That's the caliber of athletic talent that he shows. But besides that, I think he has a lot of stuff to clean up. He's had terrible fumbling issues in college. I think he like 10 in 38 games. He doesn't profile well as a pass blocker. He's pretty inefficient at that at Penn State. But I think he has some things to clean up before he sees the field consistently. Him missing time with the hamstring injury also concerns me now because I don't know what his availability is going to be like during the mini camps and during training camp too. So we'll see. I think Boston Scott might surprise some people and take away some passing down work from Sanders because we don't. That's obviously Jordan Howard's not going to have that role. But yeah, that's kind of my I guess my little analysis on those guys. I think also Justice Hill has a big role in for Baltimore. Come I guess late 2019, 2020, we see what happens with Mark Ingram. He's an interesting name at the end of that list for sure. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on those guys. I think all 5 of those guys will have a role in 19. Just how big and how fantasy relevant is really the question here.
Yeah. Just for our viewers here, can you just say your order once again, just for clarification purposes?
Sure.
Go ahead. Say your top 4
yeah,
order.
if I'm doing a dynasty startup, let's say, I'm taking Montgomery, Henderson, Jacobs, and then Sanders and Hill. Henderson is my 2 because you can probably trade him for higher 2, and that's a big thing as well. He has the highest capital of any of those guys right now, trading wise. So I think that's a big thing you're looking at when you're doing a startup too. Is what can I get post draft? So I think with Henderson, you can get a ton from the Gurley owner if you're not already drafting him as a Gurley owner. That's a big piece of drafting him as well.
Yeah, as you can see, that kind of transitions perfectly to this other topic I want to talk about, which is kind of Gurley Henderson. You're pretty team Henderson already, right? I mean, taking him as your number 2 running back is just very rich, right? Let's just keep it honest. That's incredibly rich.
Sure.
And
yeah,
you know more about injuries
rich.
than me. Because, you're kind of you have more of that sports injury background than I definitely do. I'm just some communication student. But it seems really rich because, correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, by the way, Todd Gurley just, he won't vanish, right? Todd Gurley's always going to be there, and they're paying him a lot of money. So when he's on the field, he's going to get touches. I think the worst thing that could happen, and it could happen, it's going to burn both Gurley owners and Henderson owners, is that it's kind of just a straight-up committee, and both of them never really hit the ceiling that they could. Because Todd Gurley kind of just sticks around. Maybe misses a couple games. Maybe it's even fake, and then Henderson, well, if he just flopped on that, he's stuck behind one of the best backs in the league. Because we haven't heard anything official about said injury. So Henderson's kind of like a lottery ticket, right? Like most draft picks, but really a lottery ticket. How greedy are you going to be? So why are you buying into that greed? And saying, I'm going to go Henderson, I'm going to fade Gurley, I'm going to sell Gurley, I'm going to buy into Henderson. Why is that your mentality?
Right. That's a great point to bring up. I mean, for me, my biggest thing is we're kind of getting an understanding now of how serious what he has is. And it's pretty serious. The signs are kind of there. And if you choose to read them, that's up to you. But right now, we saw the Rams trade 2 round picks to the Bucs, move up 24 spots to get Henderson. Before that, we all saw the TMZ video of him in April, right? So he's still limping in April. The Super Bowl was in February, right? So it's almost 2 months removed from the Super Bowl. But in the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl combined, that he had 14 carries for 45 yards and 2 receptions for 2 yards. Something's wrong. And it's very evident that something is wrong. And what is more likely here? The Rams protect their future investment in Todd Gurley and are very careful with him this year. Maybe put him on the IR designated for return list. They'll probably go 6-2 in those first 8 games without him. Why would they risk not having a healthy Gurley for a projected another Super Bowl run by having him play regular season games that they can win without him? That's the thing for me. Is do they need Gurley to win? The answer is no. They are a good enough team with a phenomenal coaching staff to get by without Todd Gurley and really suffer. They're going to be fine without Todd Gurley. So why would you risk that and risk the money you put into him and what it means to your Super Bowl potential? Why would you risk that if you're an NFL organization? That doesn't seem very smart. I mean, you're trying to leverage risk as much as you can, and they did leverage risk. They drafted Darrell Henderson. So they did exactly that. What I would have projected them to do is they drafted a player that they see can fill in his role, especially in the passing game, and have success. They took C.J. Anderson off the street last year, and what he averaged, like 5.8 yards per carry, something ridiculous like that. They're now drafting the most explosive running back that we've probably seen since Chris Johnson in terms of his big playability and putting him into a Rams offense that scores 34 points a game. What are you doing with that? You're right when you said earlier this class doesn't have the athletic pedigree as 2020. You're correct. But it has the brightest landing spot you could possibly be in. The Los Angeles Rams. So that's why I'm taking him. I don't see Jacobs as a lottery ticket. I don't see Sanders as a lottery ticket in 2019. Justice Hill. I don't see those guys being consistent enough for me to not take Henderson there, understanding there's a decent chance that Gurley misses significant time here. Even if they're in a timeshare, do we not think that both of them can be fantasy relevant? The offense scores 34 points a game. There's a lot to spread around there, okay? Obviously there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. I mean, you got Cup, Gurley, Henderson, Woods, God, Cooks. You have a lot of guys there, right? But they score so many points that I think that offense is viable even with a reduced workload for Todd Gurley.
Yeah, definitely. I think that offense is obviously one of the probably one of the best offenses in the league. Let's just keep it honest. McVay has done a great job. Goff really looked like from a complete bust, complete garbage, to actually potentially an MVP candidate when at least all of his pieces are there, right? I mean, he's very good. So you heard it here first from someone with a fair amount of medical background. And, people like the fantasy doctors also really kind of echo what you just told me, which is, you guys know more than me, so I'm not going to be like, well, this, that, and the other thing, right? I don't know, man. I'm just some kid. Just some, 19-year-old just chilling, talking to someone who, has gone to school, learned more about that, stuff like that. So, for me, you heard it here first. Buy Henderson, sell Gurley. So you'd obviously take Henderson. Is N'Keal Harry or your number one wide receiver over Henderson if David Montgomery's your 101? Or where would your first wide receiver?
It's tough. Honestly, I said, I don't know if I misspoke before. Montgomery is my running back one. He's not my 101. My 101 in just your standard 1 QB, 12 team PPR is N'Keal Harry. Just because situation alone, that's huge. I mean, but I think there are better receivers than N'Keal Harry in this draft class. And I actually had guys like Kelvin Harmon in my evaluation, above N'Keal Harry. But obviously, he's drafted in the 6th round, so draft capital hurts him a lot there. But I still think he's a better wide receiver than N'Keal Harry. But that's okay. I don't know. I mean, I'm not taking Henderson. What I would it really depends on what happens with Gurley. But I think if you're a Gurley owner, you're taking him as soon as 104. I mean, why would you not leverage your risk there? Just because of how prominent that offense is. I mean, if someone says they're taking Sanders over Henderson or Jacobs over Henderson, I'm not going to say they're wrong, because they're not. I mean, it's really all depending on how you view those backs and how you view Gurley's situation. With what I know and what I'm seeing, I think the situation is serious enough to consider drafting Henderson fairly high. I don't know if I'm right. I don't know if I'm wrong, but all I know is there are signs pointing to the Rams doing something with Todd Gurley that doesn't involve him getting 19 touches a game.
Yeah. I mean, as a Patriots fan, N'Keal Harry 101. Love it, right? Right. I mean,
yeah,
that's awesome. I agree wholeheartedly. Even though, wide receiver may not accrue or give back that immediate kind of value you're investing. But he's just so safe as a prospect with such an immense ceiling, just as a player on an offense that allows him to produce immediately and will hopefully develop him really, really well, use him correctly. That's awesome. But overall, like I said, it's a weaker class. Harry wouldn't be your 1-1 normally, but I feel like Harry's going to be safe. Like, he's the only person I think in this class that could not, probably won't bust, to be honest. So I like Harry. But I kind of want to move on here and just get a little general here before we wrap up. My last thing I want to know is, do you have any type of dynasty strategies, dynasty tips? We already kind of talked about some of it, but what's some advice you could give to myself or any other owner, whether it involves a rookie draft, a startup, stuff like that? What's your one dynasty kind of tip here for our viewers?
Oh gosh, I think our biggest dynasty tip in fantasy football in general is look at things in terms of risk, and don't be afraid to play it safe. We don't always have to go for boom bust potential players when we can look at guys who are safer, have higher floors, because consistency is, in my opinion, what leads to the long-term success in fantasy football and in life in general, essentially. So, I mean, what I like to do is I like to take a piece of paper and I like to write down my projected points a game per position and look at past years, what won the championships in those leagues. Let's say, if I'm in a 2QB, PPR league, let's say 135 points, 140 points, whatever it is, won the championship last year. My goal is to get as close to that as I can before the season begins, with my projections of those players and what they'll do in that current year. So it kind of gives me a barometer of success before I attain it. Obviously, things can go wrong. Those players can get injured. But you kind of have to know, if that player gets injured, if I'm putting X player in who scores 18 points a game, who gets hurt, then I have to go to my bench and get this player who scores 11, 12 points a game. That's a 6, 7 point per game difference, right? So how's it going to weigh into the grand scheme of things when I'm trying to make a push for the championship? That, I guess those are kind of my tips. I mean, I would just leverage risk and just try to be risk averse, and then try to make a plan of action essentially and map out where you're getting your points on a week to week basis and how that's aligned with past championships in your league and past playoff contenders.
That's awesome. And I think risk is so important because, especially with draft picks, they're going to bust. A lot of them are going to bust. Normally, we talked about this the last one-on-one here with Drew Osenchuk, and he was kind of 4 to 5 players per the draft class average. That's what kind of works out, right? Most of it's just, they bust. So trying to be risk averse. Not being afraid to take risks, but also trying to balance that risk. Trying to leverage it. Trying to say, maybe I have a player like a Tyreek Hill who's already pretty risky on my roster currently as a rookie draft. Maybe I go with someone safer, like one of these tight ends, or maybe I go instead of like a lottery ticket, maybe like a McCole Hardman. Or granted, that you might want to take Hardman there just because you don't know what's up with that situation. But you know what I mean? Like, you got to balance risk. Or let's say I have a Todd Gurley or a Leonard Fournette, some of these more injury-prone players. Maybe I want to go with someone safe, like a Brandon Cooks, someone consistent like that, like a T.Y. Hilton, players like that. So it's about maybe going risky, safe, risky, safe. Try to balance it. Because if you go all risk, you're either gonna flame out or you're gonna kill it. And nobody likes, losing all their games. So try to balance it out. And I really like that advice. Is there anything else here before I give my closing regards? You kind of wanted to add something that maybe I cut you off about, or you didn't talk about where you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, I think we touched on everything that's kind of prevalent. But I do appreciate you having me on, and I apologize for being a little bit late due to the great Chicago traffic. But yeah, I mean, if there's anything else that you think of, just feel free to let me know, and they'd be happy to come back on.
Awesome. I think we'd love to have you back on here. Same thing with pretty much anyone I interview. I have so many more questions, but I want to thank you so much for being on here today. I want to give you one more shout out. Please make sure to follow Angelo. He's growing so much, 6 weeks. And he has like times 10 of whatever my follow rate is. that's whatever. Make sure you follow him at Angelo_fantasy on Twitter. It's blowing up. He's super active. I mean, there's no reason not to follow this guy because he's going to give you something that not many other analysts, in my opinion, can give you. It's not just film analysis telling you, hey man, this guy accelerates fast, or hey man, this guy's pretty strong. We can already quantify those things with metrics, or they're kind of irrelevant in their own way. He's going to tell you how people mentally process, how this deeper level thinking, that you can't really get anywhere else. So make sure you go follow him, or maybe not follow him. Maybe just go check him out, and then make that decision for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if I could tell you what to do, I'd make you go follow him right now. So thank you for being here, Brandon, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day. No problem being late. I had nothing to do tonight, so don't worry about it. So thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And for our viewers, I'll see you guys next time.